In this Photoshop video, I'm going to show you how we can create a composite image like this. And along the way, we'll encounter many of the key features of layers in Photoshop. So let's get cracking here. I'm going to go into Adobe Bridge here, and this is the sequence of images that I'd like to combine. So you can see it's a rapid fire sequence with the skater in different positions throughout the frame. Now, I'd like to open all of these images up and combine them into one action sequence. So I can highlight them all here in Adobe Bridge just by dragging over them. And so the quick way to do this is to go to Tools, Photoshop, and we can use load files into Photoshop layers. And that will open my entire sequence as a stack. Now I'm going to show you how we can do it manually, just to give you that option, which can be useful for all kinds of projects. So I'm just going to double click on my files here to open them all up individually. Now I'm going to use this empty frame here as sort of a base for all of my other images to add them to. So I'm going to use the move tool here. I'll grab that from the Photoshop toolbar over to the side, and then I'll go to another image and click and drag it up to the tab of my empty frame here. Then still holding the mouse button down, I'll drag it in and release to copy that other image over, and I'll just position it right on top like this. Now if I bring up my layers panel here by going to Window, Layers, you can see now how my image that I just added has been placed on a separate layer above the empty image, which is at the bottom of the stack there. So if I toggle the visibility of that layer on or off by clicking the eye icon here, you can see that we have an empty frame at the bottom, and then above that this image here. So all I need to do now is copy across the rest of my frames. So I'll go to this one here again, drag it in with the move tool, position it on top. I can hold shift as I drop the image on top, and it'll just drop it in exactly the same position, so I don't have to worry about positioning in it. So I'll go through the rest of the frames here. And now we can see how each image occupies a different layer in my layer stack. And in fact, let's just dock my layers panel over to the side over here. And each layer is sort of like a piece of paper in a stack. So I feel like this layer here, layer 5, has got my hero image on, the one I want to be sort of center stage in my composite. So I'm going to drag that to the top of the stack here. You can see how now that layer is visible and all of the rest are hidden. Now I'm going to hide that layer for now, and what I'd like to do is blend all of my other layers into one. So I can experiment with layer blend modes here, and these change how some of the details on the layers show through one another. So I can go to the blend mode drop down here at the top of the layer stack, and I'll change it from normal. I think we could try darken here. So now we can see I've combined this layer here, layer 8, with the layer below it. So only the darker pixels on each layer are going to be showing through. I can do that with the rest of my layers here. In fact, I can do them all at once. So I'm going to highlight them all except that empty background layer there by holding shift and clicking between the top and the bottom there, and I can change the blend mode of them all at once to darken. And that's looking pretty good, but I think overall the composite is starting to look a bit messy. So what I could also do is fade out some of these layers by adjusting the layer opacity here. So let's just drop down the opacity on some of these layers here so you can see I can fade them out. Let's perhaps just sort of fade them into the middle here so they get slightly stronger as they go in towards the middle. So I can just drag down on the opacity slider here. Just by dragging over the word opacity, I can knock out some of the opacity on each of these layers here. And let's continue through our sequence like this. I think that's going to look really nice when I start to combine my hero layer there at the top of the stack. So I'll fade these images out here like this, and that's looking much better. Now let's reveal that layer at the top of the stack there, and I haven't changed the blend mode on this layer, so it's set to normal, which means it's hiding everything else at the moment. But what I'd like to do is isolate the figure here in the center, the skater. In fact, let's zoom in on him in the middle here, and so I'd like to isolate him so I can see all of those semi-transparent layers below. To do this, I can use a layer mask. So if I add a layer mask to this layer by clicking the layer mask icon here at the bottom of the layer stack, you can see now I get sort of a white rectangle appearing on that layer. And while this rectangle is highlighted, I can add black to my image to hide parts of the image. So I could grab the brush tool, set my foreground color to black down here, or I could hit D and then X to set it to black. And then I could simply start painting to hide parts of that layer and reveal the other layers around it like this. So I could do that, but I think that's going to take me quite a while because I need to sort of get really precise around the figure here and paint all around the arms and things like that. So I'm going to undo that, and instead I can use a selection tool to help me out here. So let's just undo that a few times. And instead, what I'm going to do is grab the object selection tool from the toolbar up here. And with this tool, I just need to drag a box over the object that I want to select. So I drag a box over the skater here, and you can see it selected the figure but not the board here. So I can hold shift and drag again to add another box over that area there, and perhaps just drag over the arm here to see if I can pick up a bit more detail in the figure. So now I've got a selection of the skater. I can simply click the add layer mask icon again here, and that will add a mask to that layer. And we can see on the layer over here how most of that layer mask is black. In fact, I can hold Alt and click on it to give me a view of my mask. And this shows me that everything in black is hidden and only the white parts are visible. And that gives me my composite, where now I'm seeing that top layer combined with everything else to give me my effect. So that's a few ways in which we can composite layers together. Now we can also use layers for more practical purposes. Let's say I want to add a tonal effect on top of everything. I can click the create adjustment layer icon here. Let's perhaps go for a color balance adjustment. We'll skew the colors here perhaps towards cyan and blue slightly more like this. And let's also perhaps add contrast. We can do that with a curves adjustment layer. So let's go for curves this time, so you can see how I can build up my different adjustments using these adjustment layers. Let's boost the contrast with an S-shaped curve like this, just to give the image a bit more punch. And let's also perhaps just add a hue saturation adjustment layer just to pump up the colors a little bit more like this. So you can see how I can build up my tonal adjustments here on separate layers, and these layers affect all the layers below them in the stack. And this is a great non-destructive way to work because I can edit these adjustments at any point. I can just double click on the thumbnail there and tweak the settings at any point like this. Now I think we're nearly there with my image, but I'd like to do a little bit of tidying up. If we go in closer here, we can see there are a few distracting details around the bottom here, some electricity wires and some trees here. I'd just like to come up with a nice clean backdrop here. So I'm going to make a new layer at the top of my layer stack by clicking the new layer icon here at the bottom, and then I'm going to grab the spot healing brush tool here, and if I go up to my tool options, I can make sure sample all layers is checked up here. That means I can heal on my empty layer at the top here while sampling from all of those layers below. In fact, let's just double click the layer name there and we'll call it retouching. Now I can use the left and right square bracket keys on my keyboard to resize my healing brush tip here, and I can just click and then shift click to make a straight line here to heal some of these distracting electricity wires in the background. And this is going to take me a little while, so I'll jump forwards to a point where I've finished off retouching the backdrop. And after a few minutes work, I've finished retouching those little distracting details in the background there. And if I just hold Alt and click on the eye icon here, this would temporarily hide everything else. And this gives you an idea of where I have painted with my healing and clone tools on the layer here. So you can see how that works in combination with all of my other layers to remove these little details in the background. And that's my finished image. So there we go. That's how to create an action sequence in Photoshop using a variety of layer skills. We started off with an empty scene here. We added each individual layer here using blend modes to combine them all with the darken blend mode. We masked our middle image here. We added these different adjustments to change the toning before retouching those distracting details. And that's the finished image.